Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a beautiful princess named Snow White. Her skin was as white as snow, her lips as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. Her beauty was renowned throughout the land, but it also sparked the jealousy of her wicked stepmother, the queen. The queen possessed a magical mirror that she would consult every day, asking, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" For years the mirror replied, "You are my queen." But one day, the mirror answered, "Snow White is the fairest of them all." Enraged by this revelation, the queen plotted to rid herself of Snow White. She summoned a huntsman and commanded him to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. However, the kind-hearted huntsman could not bring himself to harm the innocent princess. He warned Snow White of the queen's evil plan and urged her to flee into the forest, never to return. Terrified and alone, Snow White wandered through the dark forest until she came upon a quaint little cottage. Exhausted, she knocked on the door, but when no one answered, she pushed it open and stepped inside. To her surprise, the cottage was inhabited by 7 dwarfs who were out working in the mines. Snow White was so tired that she fell asleep across 3 of the small beds. When the dwarfs returned home that evening, they were astonished to find a beautiful girl in their cottage. After hearing her story, they decided to offer her shelter and protection from the wicked queen. Days turned into weeks, and Snow White lived happily with the 7 dwarfs, keeping their home tidy and cooking delicious meals for them. However, the queen soon discovered that Snow White was still alive. Furious, she devised a plan to kill Snow White herself. Disguising herself as an old peddler woman, the queen visited the cottage with a poisoned apple. She offered the apple to Snow White, who, unaware of the danger, took a bite. The moment the apple touched her lips, Snow White fell into a deep, death-like sleep. When the dwarves returned home and found Snow White, they were heartbroken. They laid her in a glass coffin in the forest, unable to bear burying her. For days and nights they kept watch over her, hoping for a miracle. One day, a prince from a neighboring kingdom happened upon the forest and saw Snow White lying in the glass coffin. Captivated by her beauty, he felt an overwhelming sadness. He gently lifted Snow White and kissed her. Miraculously, the kiss broke the spell, and Snow White awoke from her enchanted sleep. Overjoyed, the dwarfs and the prince celebrated Snow White's return. The prince asked Snow White to marry him, and she gladly accepted. They invited the dwarfs to live with them in the palace, where they all lived happily ever after. And so, the kind and beautiful Snow White found her happily ever after, protected by the love of the dwarfs and her prince, free from the jealousy and wickedness of the queen forever.